yeah, it was so easy. Cool. Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Welcome to our webinar. If you let us know where you're from in the comments, we'll say hello to you all over the world. Today we're talking to Luke, who, well, I'll let you introduce yourself, Luke.
Hello, everyone. So yeah, I'm Luke. I taught in China, and I also taught online. So I did China I was teaching face-to-face in China for a little bit over a year, and then I did about a year back in the UK teaching online. So I sort of did a little bit of both of the options that are available, and then I actually started working for the TEFL org after that. So that's where I am now, and yeah, happy to be here.
Awesome. Great. So if you've got any questions, pop them in the comments. We'll go through a few questions that we've got kind of ready to go, but if you have any others, we'll get to them afterwards. So please do let us know your questions in the comments. Great. So we'll get started in a minute. We'll just say hello to some people. So we've got Anne from Germany. Hi, Anne. Cully from London, Rachel from New York, Cork, Germany, St Albans in the UK. That's Chris. Hello, everyone, and welcome. All right, so we'll get to some of the questions now. So, Luke, before you started teaching English, what did you do, and how did you get into teaching English?
Right, yeah. So I actually went to university in Brighton. I started a little bit late. I had an office job from 18 to 21. And I did that. It was started with admin, and then there was a little bit of logistics and sort of contract management there. But once I hit about 21, I sort of wanted to go back into education and really wanted a degree. So I did a degree at Brighton doing music production. Loved that, was really into that while I was there. So I was in Brighton for about 3 or 4 years. Completed my degree, and like most people that once they complete their degree, especially my degree was in the arts, which is, you know, one of the ones that isn't as easy to find a career path straight afterwards. So I was sort of not sure what I wanted to do, and always wanted to take a gap year but never had the chance. So was looking at lots of options and stumbled across teaching English as a foreign language just from Google searching options and careers, and sort of did a little bit of research on it and knew I wanted to travel and thought it was the best fit for me at the time. I didn't want to jump into another office job because I'd done that before doing my degree. So that's when I stumbled across teaching English as a foreign language, looked into it, and then applied to lots of different companies. That was like once I made the decision to sort of do it, it was just a case of looking at the options and where I wanted to go. That's a big thing for most people is where do I do it?
Definitely.
And once I sort of looked at the options, I decided that I was intrigued by China, and looked at, when you look at the top 5 places to teach, and China was up there, and I looked into it and the wages were quite good. And that's when I decided China was probably the best option for me.
Great. Yeah, China's a big part of you know, the options, the love available in China. Yeah, definitely. What was the application process like for applying for the positions? And how long did process take? One of the questions we get a lot. How much time do you allow for the application process?
So my application process took, I think the big difference is if you have already completed the TEFL or if you haven't got a TEFL. If you've already got a TEFL, it's a lot quicker process than if you haven't got a TEFL. Can you hear me, Rachel?
Yes,
Yeah,
I
you
can.
can
You
hear
went
me?
to a
Sorry,
little
you froze on my
glitchy there
screen.
for a second. You're back. Yeah.
Lovely. So yeah, once you've got the TEFL, once you have the certificate, the process is a lot quicker. I think from applying to having the interview to going through, I got accepted, I think a month after, and then it was a case of booking flights, and that took, I think it was 2 months from when I got accepted to then actually flying out to China.
Great. Okay, so not too long then. That's
Not too long.
definitely good. Yeah. And a time to allow yourself to kind of figure it out what you're doing as well, and kind of adapt to your new career. So when you arrived, who were you teaching? So kind of what age were they? What level of English were they at? Just gives a bit more about kind of students that you taught.
Of course. So it was a range from 3 years old to about 16, 17 years old. The majority were 7 to 11 years old, but I had one of the oldest classes at my school, and that was 16 and 17-year-olds. But I also had lots of classes that were 3 to 4-year-old, and did demo classes which were brand new, that had never been in an English school before. So I basically did the range. The only people I didn't teach was adults, because that was a separate, the company I worked for, it was kids and teens, and then adults were taught at a separate center.
Right. Great. Okay, perfect. I also want to say apologies. Apparently, it's my connection that's not so good. We've had a bit of a storm at the minute here, so maybe the weather is not being very helpful. But Luke, your internet is fine, so don't worry.
Right, yeah, I can hear you, Rachel. I just, yeah, you're a little bit blurry.
Okay, no problem. Maybe for the best. So, can you give us a bit more information about what your teaching module was like? So, how often did you teach? What did your day involve? Yeah, that kind of thing.
So yeah, of course. When you normally, if you go with one of the big companies that are teaching, they sort of ease you in to a certain degree. So you have like a week or two of induction, which you are with other people that have just flown to the country that you're, so all new teachers. My onboarding had, I think, 25 of us. So for the first 2 weeks, we were staying in a hotel, and we were all in the same hotel. And that gave us a chance to sort out our accommodation. And normally, I mean, I lived with people that were onboarding with me. So I met 2 people that I got on with over the first sort of week of training, and we went house hunting and got a house. So 2 weeks after I landed in China, I was in a house with 2 other teachers, and then I went to my school for the first time after the 2 weeks. And then normally with most schools, you'll start your first day at the school after the 2-week period, and you'll have a meeting with the manager, meet all your co-workers, and then you'll just shadow someone, a teacher that has already been there for 6 months, a year, 2 years, an experienced teacher, and you'll go in and sit at the back of the classroom and watch. Every school has slightly different ways they teach, slightly different curriculums. So really, it's just the stepping stone of, this is how we do it, this is what we're doing. And you normally do that for about a week. And then you will start teaching, from my experience anyway, you'll then teach with another teacher. So you'll go with an experienced teacher. I had a mentor, so I would meet with them every week, and we would go through if I had any questions, and you'd then teach with them for another couple of lessons, and then you'll get given your schedule. And the schedule my experience, it started off quite small. They didn't just give you 10 classes in a day. It was very much you'd start with 1 or 2 a day, do that for a week, and then you'll build more as you get given more classes. But once I was more experienced, it was about during the weekdays. So our schedule was Monday to Friday. We would work 2 p.m. till 9 p.m. So you'd get in during the day, but you wouldn't start classes till 5 p.m. So you had admin time. 2 till 5 was admin, where you would lesson plan, look at what you're teaching that day, and then you would teach no more than 3 classes. So an hour class, and then there were 3 of them. But the weekends were the busiest time because I worked at a training center. So Saturday and Sunday would be 9 a.m. till 6 p.m. And you would have a lot more classes. So you would have up to 6 or 7 classes on Saturday and Sunday. And you would still only work 5 days a week, but your weekend would be Tuesday, Wednesday, or Wednesday, right, Thursday. And they split that up. So the school was running 7 days a week, but you were only working 5 days a week.
Okay, great. So even though you had the 5 days, it's not necessarily a 9 to 5 kind of position.
No, it's normally, and this is obviously in China, but normally the training centers are during the week 5 till 9 p.m. classes because the kids are in state schools during the day. So this is an extra class that they do as an extracurricular in the evenings and the weekends. So you do 2 full days and then you do 3 sort of half days. They felt like half days because a lot of the foreigners that are also out there teaching also are working weekends. So the foreign weekend out there is Tuesday, Wednesday. So everyone goes out on them days. Which is quite nice. And normally there's communities. Certainly in China, there was a huge expat community, and you have no problems finding other teachers. And it is mainly teachers because it's sort of like a closed hub, and you go to a bar, and if there's foreigners at that bar, 9 times out of 10, they are teachers, especially in the big cities in China anyway.
Brilliant. So it's not hard to meet people then.
No,
definitely.
no. Yeah. I mean, I met lots of teachers and some people that weren't teachers, that were foreigners that had been there years. And I still talk to a lot of the people I met. And a lot of them are back in America now. But I've got 4 or 5 that I met in China that I meet every couple of months back in England, and we get an Airbnb and meet up and talk. So you can get lasting connections from your time teaching for sure.
Oh, that's brilliant. What support did you have available during your time at school? I think you mentioned that you had a mentor. Did that continue through the whole time?
So, I was really lucky in the sense of I got placed into a really nice school. It was quite a large school, so there was 30 other teachers at the school. They were all very welcoming, like any sort of work environment. But it really helps when you have that as a support system. You have people that have been there 6 months that are still relatively new, and you have people that have been there 3-4 years. And if you need any help, they know, they've been through it. You know, everyone has got on the plane, gone to a country that they don't know, had to embrace the culture, have to, get used to so many things that they always help you. And I actually, within 6 months, I became a mentor for my school, and I mentored a new teacher that came, which was actually really rewarding for me because I saw all of the things that I had. I was really nervous on my first lesson. I was worried I wouldn't be able to do it. And once you teach your first lesson, it's so easy. Once you get past that, you build up this sort of moment in time where you're going to be left in a classroom with lots of children, and everyone is nervous. Every teacher that I met was like, the first time you teach, you will be nervous. But within 2 weeks, there's no nerves whatsoever.
Yeah, I think that's one of the main things that we have kind of our students worry about is, especially those without teaching experience, it's so daunting to go from, doing a course to then suddenly being in the classroom for the first time. So
Of
I'm
course.
sure people will find that really reassuring to hear.
Yeah, I mean, you will never not be nervous. I don't think
Yeah,
it's like if you do any new thing in your life, you're always going to have some form of nerves that come with it. But you will get over that. You will get over it so quickly. And I had never. My TEFL that I did was online, so I didn't have any sort of in-class experience before I flew to China. And that first lesson I did was my first time in the classroom by myself with children, and had to. You learn
yeah,
on
wow,
the job as well. There's so many things that when you do your TEFL, you're like, oh yeah, that'll be really good. I'll do it this way, and that'll really work. And then you get into a classroom with 10 5-year-olds, and it doesn't work how you think, and you have to adapt it.
yeah,
But you get there in the end. You always get there.
yeah. It's just practice makes perfect.
Of
Hey.
course.
um, so in your time in China, what did you do when you weren't working? What kind of new experiences did you have, and what
Yeah,
did you get up to?
I did a lot because we had sort of the mornings off during the week. We'd always get up early, and I'd meet up with my co-workers and my friends that I'd sort of built up there, and we'd do. I mean, Shanghai. I worked in Shanghai, so it's a big city, and there was 26 million people, I think. So huge city, huge city, and an abundance of stuff to do. But we also did bigger trips. So I went to the Yellow Mountains in China. I went to the Great Wall of China. And we also traveled a bit. I had a couple of big trips that were planned, but they got cut short for other reasons. But most weeks you can do something new. And because it's such a big city, it's very easy to find something to do. And the domestic flights and even the flights to other places in Asia were really cheap. And they also have really fast train networks, so you can get a far distance very quickly. So really traveled and met new people. That was in a year. I did so much sort of networking in the sense of meeting friends and going to new places, doing new things. And especially in China, that they have so many activities, even in a city. You know, you can go and do rock climbing, and then down the street you could go to a karaoke bar, and then the next street there's something else. There's so much there that you never run out of things to do. And every day off, I wasn't in my house. I was out every day. So yeah, traveling and just the country, the food as well. I mean, I loved the food in China. So when I got there, it was just, let's go out to eat every single day.
I guess you had plenty of options in Shanghai as well.
Yeah. And if you like, I mean, I really liked the food. But even if I had a close friend that was a vegetarian, and there's no word in Chinese for vegetarian, so they just don't have it in their vocabulary. So she had to improvise and basically get the translation for no meat, and have to just reiterate that 3 or 4 times. But she did. She made it as a vegetarian, so you can do it. If you're in a foreign country and you're a vegan or a vegetarian, there are ways around it.
Great. So you learn to adapt to the. Did you learn any of the language when you were out there, or?
Yes, it was very hard. It was hard, but I learned the basics. I could have a brief conversation, say hello, say how are you, the basics. And I could order food, although sometimes I would order it and it came completely different.
So it's
I
always a
remember
surprise.
I really like iced coffee. So I asked my co-workers, because we had Chinese teachers as well as English teachers. So I asked my co-workers, well, how do I order an iced coffee? And I sort of wrote it down and sort of had a look, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go. I went in there, I asked for it, and I just got a hot coffee with no milk, which was the opposite to what I wanted. And I went back up to my co-workers and they just laughed. They were like, you obviously didn't say it right. And I was like, I'm sure I did. But you learn, and people are so helpful. As long as you have the basics and you try, they're so happy you try. But I found as well, it got to the point where a lot of the shop owners and the people that you meet and you try your Chinese or whatever language you're trying, they're also wanting, they see you as a way of learning how to speak English. So you've got them trying to speak English to you while you're trying to speak Chinese to them, and it's quite funny. It can be quite funny.
Disjointed conversation, let me.
Yeah. But a lot of them are just interested, especially in China. They were so nice and friendly. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. So when you came back to the UK, what was your experience of teaching online like? How was it different?
So I was fortunate. So I did come back because COVID had happened and I was still in China when it originally happened. So I made the decision to move back to the UK, mainly because my family and friends were worried. I was getting calls every day. So I was like, you know what, I prefer to be safe than sorry. So I spoke to my company and they were very happy for me to do so. They basically said, look, we'll keep you employed. We understand that you're going to feel more comfortable in your own country. We'd closed the school at this point. So the schools were closed and they said, look, we're going to be running the classes, but they're going to be online. So you can continue working for us in the UK. So I didn't have to find a new job. I sort of got transferred. So I was teaching the same children I was teaching face-to-face for a year in China from my house in the UK.
Oh, well, that's great.
Yeah, so I hadn't seen them for like a month and they were so happy to see me. And, you know, I had 10 little faces on my screen and they were 4 or 5 years old and they remembered me and they were so happy to see me. And when I first got told, we're moving your classes to online, I was a bit apprehensive, especially for the young ones. I wasn't too concerned with the 10 to 15 to 16-year-olds, but I was really concerned with the 4-year-old because I thought, how are they going to sit on an iPad and listen to me for an hour? And how am I going to control them? It was daunting, but they were so good. They would sit and they would listen and they would do the whole hour. And I had less problems teaching them online than I did in the classroom.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think because they knew me, it was easier because I'd already built a rapport with these kids. So there wasn't who's this strange man who's talking to me on a computer. It was, they know me, they've seen me for months. So it was an easier transition than I expected. But yeah, I mean, I had one class that moved over online that was 16 sort of 10-year-olds. So I had 16 of them and me online. And that ran for 6 months, that class, and it was really successful. So you can do it. And there's benefits and negatives to both sides of it, to teaching face-to-face and to teaching online. But both are enjoyable and rewarding in their own way. They were very different. I preferred teaching face-to-face than teaching online, but I could see other people preferring the online route than the face-to-face, and even the sort of time teaching, because when you're obviously face-to-face, you're in a big city, it takes you an hour to commute there. You've then got to wait 2 hours before your class starts. You then have a half an hour break between the 3 classes, then you've got to commute back. Whereas online, you can rock out of bed at 3 a.m., teach a class for an hour, and then go back to sleep. And because of the time difference, when we first started it, because some classes on the weekends were 9 a.m. Chinese time, it was midnight, 1 a.m. my time. So, and it was quite hard to adjust because everyone else is on the schedule, you know, the English schedule, and you're on a schedule that at the weekend drastically changes from midnight to 7 a.m. So it was just coffees and getting used to it, but I managed it. But our school were really good and they changed it. So they moved all the classes that were midnight to 3 a.m. So the first class actually started at 5 a.m. So it was a little bit easier to swallow. But yeah, so I did that for a long time, the online. And I had the same kids that I taught in China, which was quite cool.
Yeah, that's definitely helpful. In terms of like the setup for teaching online, did you need anything extra? Like, what was your kind of tech and software needs
So
like?
they had software. It was called Tencent Classroom. So it was, I think all of them roughly do the same thing. I've only used Tencent Classroom, but they all have a whiteboard. They have a little screen where you can give rewards and emojis, and you can also make it makes, if you're creative, you can do a lot with something that at the start you think, oh, it's just a screen. So you can do a lot with something that at the start you don't think's that sort of adaptable. But I found it really good. Again, the first time I did it, I was very nervous, and that's after teaching for a year. So even after teaching face-to-face for a year, because I was doing something else, the online side, I'd never done it before, I was nervous. My first class, I remember sitting there thinking, how am I going to get through this hour? What am I going to do?
Yeah.
And you learn, you learn. And by the end of it, the online classes were less planning than when I was doing the face-to-face classes, because you have the same sort of blueprint and you just adapt it for the content. So you find a way of it working, and then once you've got the structure of a class, you then just adapt it. It's just a case of taking out the content and putting in the content that you want, whether it's grammar or speaking or listening. That you quickly learn so many games and so many ways of teaching that you don't have to think, you just sort of do it. I found myself in autopilot, and I didn't, some lessons I didn't have a plan for. I woke up at 3 a.m. and I'd forgot to plan it. I forgot I had the lesson, and I just went in. And because you learn how to teach, once you know how to teach, as long as you've got the content, you'll be able to teach it. So yeah.
Oh, brilliant. So it kind of became like second nature to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, some teachers I found, they still after 2 years were planning every lesson because that's how they like to do it. But everyone's different. For me,
Yeah.
I didn't write anything down. I kept it all in my head, and I sort of did it that way. But some people work differently. So you just find a way that it works for you. And there were certain lessons, like if I hadn't taught the content before, I would have to plan. But once you've taught a lesson 5, 10, 20 times, the only thing you have to adapt is who you're teaching it to. So if you know that you've got a really active class, you'll swap a game that was a reading game for a game where they have to run up to the board and do something a little bit more active, because you know that they need engagement that way as opposed to the reading. Especially, I mean, my experience was the boy, especially the small children, the boys wanted to run about and the girls wanted to just read, and it was adapting it. And if you had two classes and 90% of them were girls and 90% of them were boys, it was slightly different in the way you taught them. And
that's interesting.
Because you react to how they want, and they learn best doing what they like doing. So if you've got a class that really likes doing this game, you say, we can do that game for the last 10 minutes of the lesson if we do all of the stuff we need to cover during the main part. And then it keeps them engaged because they want to play the game that they like at the end.
Yeah, definitely get motivated to do what they need to get to the game. Brilliant. So you mentioned that there's difference in hours with teaching in person and online. Did you do kind of more hours of actually teaching online, or was there just kind of less, like you say, commuting and breaks?
I think it worked out actual teaching hours about the same.
Okay.
About the same actual teaching hours, but obviously there was no commute. So it probably worked out that I was working for less time. But with the online as well, once my classes ended and China went back to normal, I got transferred to another department that was an online department of the company. And I got given classes that were new. So they were completely new, and they were one-on-one classes as well. So they were slightly different. And the schedule was, the parents chose their teacher. So I would get a request and say, this parent wants you to teach this child at this time, and that would be added to my schedule. So at the start, my schedule only had one lesson a day for about 2 weeks, and then it built up, and I got to the point where I probably had 5 classes a day, but they were only 40 minutes long because they were one-to-one classes, so they were slightly shorter.
Right. So it kind of time if you're teaching a class.
Yeah, it really depends. I mean, some of the teachers I met in China only had 3-day work weeks. So they were at a company that only had 3-day work weeks, and there were other people that worked 6 days a week, but did less hours. And it really depends on what company you're with and what's in your contract, really.
Yeah.
There's normally, in most of the teaching positions and the contracts, is there's a maximum teaching hours. So the maximum you'll teach is this. It's worth looking at that when you're looking at positions, and look at how much is the maximum. But you normally don't hit. I never hit my maximum.
Right.
I always had slots. So I'm trying to remember my schedule when I was teaching abroad, but it was one day I only had 1 class. So on Monday, I would get in at 2 o'clock, and even though the school was open till 9 p.m, if you only had 1 class, you could leave at 6. So my Mondays were, I got in at 2, I had lunch in my office, I spoke to my colleagues till 5 p.m, I did an hour class, and then I went home.
Yeah.
So Mondays were great.
Monday, yeah.
Mondays were good. And then I had Tuesday and Wednesday off work. And then Thursdays and Fridays were a little bit busy, and then Saturday and Sunday was also the busiest. But even, I think my Saturday was only 4 hours actual teaching, but it was spread out over the day. So I did 1 hour 9 till 10, and then 11 till 12, lunch, and then 4 till 6. So,
yeah, so you still weren't kind of overwhelmed by the
never overwhelmed.
Yeah.
You get really good at sort of managing time with it as well. So at the start, an hour lesson feels really long, but I was doing the older students would have a 2-hour class. So you'd do an hour, a 15-minute break, and then another hour with the same class, and that flies by, especially the older kids. I had one class that was 15 to 17-year-olds, and they were so smart. Sometimes they were correcting me, and it was quite sort of eye-opening. And some of them were really good at art, so we had a cyborg category where they would draw cyborgs, and some of the drawings were incredible. So yeah, the older kids for me was really rewarding, because it was that next step. When you're teaching 5-year-olds, it's great, they're really cute, and it's rewarding in that sense, but you are teaching them cat, hat, very basic, so it can become a little bit tedious, because you've taught the cat lesson 200 times, and if I hear the cat song one more time, I'm gonna lose my mind. But yeah.
You need to create a dog song, maybe, just to mix it up.
Yeah.
So you talked a bit about kind of like improvising your lessons to some degree, but what resources did you have available, especially when you started to plan your lessons? Like, did the company provide them, or did you find them yourself online, and would you recommend anywhere to find resources to plan those lessons?
So the best way, I mean, if you're pre actually going and starting teaching, you can look online, you can find lesson plans everywhere. But for me, when I got there, the company provided sort of example lesson plans for every lesson that they taught, which were they were basic, but they gave you the basic structure. But the best way is ask the more experienced teachers that are at your school, can I actually just have a look at your lesson plan? They will not say no, because for them, it really does not matter to them if you look at their lesson plan. And you can say, look, can we just run down 5 minutes and have a look through it and tell me why you picked this and why you picked that? People and teachers will always help other teachers. And that's how I did it. I had one of my great friends, I'm still great friends with her. She would every day for the first month would sit down with a lesson plan that she created, run me through it. And I learned loads of games. I learned how she structured it. So you learn mainly through other people. You can look at a lesson plan online and you can look at that. But if you've got someone who's actually wrote it from scratch and can tell you how they've wrote it, how they've structured it, it really is the most beneficial way to do it.
Yeah, definitely. And how long, like, from when you started to maybe when you had a bit more experience, how long did it take you to plan an average lesson? So you said you kind of you created one lesson and then taught it quite a few times.
Yeah.
But the initial kind of
so at the start, it will take some time. I think probably 20 minutes, half an hour, if not a little bit more. Because you're overthinking it as well. You're thinking about every little detail. You're like, oh, it needs to have this and this and that. Truthfully honest, after 6 months, I could do a lesson plan in about 2.5 minutes.
Amazing.
From just looking at what I had, what I needed to teach. The older ones, the 16-year-old classes that were a 2-hour class on cyborgs, a little bit longer, because sometimes I'd look at the content and I wouldn't know the content. I wouldn't, because if you don't, they have so many categories. There was even like one that was sort of magicians, and there was loads of like tricks and stuff. And in the lesson plan, it said, oh, learn these 2 magician's tricks. And I was like, I'm not a magician. I can't do tricks. I'm not going to do that. But what I did is I got my phone out and showed them. I had a VPN. So in China, you can't have YouTube, but I had a VPN so I could have YouTube. So I typed in magic tricks and got them to watch the magic tricks, and that worked. And they tried it, and then I sent them home, and their task was to present their magic trick that they'd created, and then the winner got a prize, and that worked really good. We had a little show at the end of the lesson, and they all did it. And so quite often it's just about adapting to who you're teaching, and once you know your classes, you can adapt it. But especially the small kids, 2.5 minutes. Once you're very good, you know the structure of a class, you know you've got an hour, you need to do this for 10 minutes, this for 10 minutes, you've got a book section you need to do. It really is just substituting the content for what you want to teach.
Yeah, brilliant.
So it gets easier, and you won't have, I mean, my admin time, I had a really relaxed boss and director of studies at my school, but my admin time, which was 2 till 5 p.m., she let me bring my Nintendo Switch in, and I used to play my Nintendo Switch instead of planning my lessons because I'd already done it. So it depends on the company you're with, but the work sort of ethos in training centers and in an office setting is not as strict as you find in sort of traditional companies. It's very relaxed. You can go out and get your lunch. It's just more relaxed. Like I said, there's not many companies you can, or work environments where you can bring in your gaming console and play it in the office. But we all used to sit there, and you know, it was more like a family than colleagues at the training center I was at, for sure.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's good to hear as well, because that's one of the things people worry about, is meeting people and making connections and making friends. So that's really good to hear. Okay, well, that's all the questions we have. I know I can see some of you have given us some questions to look at. So let's have a look at some of them. We'll just see who else we've got. We've got Maria from Russia. Hello. We've got Tamara. You've had some great questions. Adrian from Brazil. Hello, Brazil. Denise from Florida. Hello, everyone. Yeah, so if you've got any questions for Luke about any of his experiences, either teaching in China or teaching online from the UK, then do let us know. And teaching during the pandemic as well. That might be some, might have some questions about that, definitely. Let's find some questions that we can ask. Okay, so Dawn has asked, how much demand is there for online teaching in your experience?
There's definitely demand. I found that especially at the start, there was a big sort of move to online in general. Sort of when COVID first happened, there was a big sort of push, and most companies sort of went the online route. And there are companies that are now just doing online because it works for them. It's less, there's less overheads for them when it comes to teaching. And a lot of the parents that I spoke to of the children I taught face to face and then online preferred the online because they didn't have to spend 20 minutes driving their kid to the place, sitting for an hour and waiting for their kid to get out of class and then driving to, they save 2 hours a day because they could carry on doing what they're doing and they'd give their son or daughter a iPad and carry on. So I think it's a much more legitimate form of teaching than it was 2 years ago. It's being adopted by a lot more companies. So I don't think there's going to be a sudden sort of stop or no more need for online teaching. I don't think there is a high demand, and there's lots of companies that are currently looking for online teachers.
It's definitely become a much more popular way of working now. I think we've all just adapted to it, definitely. Thanks for that question, Dawn. So I think we have another one from Tamara, who asks about kind of things that were included. So she says, do you get reimbursed for flights? And if so, how does that work?
That is dependent on the company. My company did reimburse me for flights, and they actually gave me a yearly allowance for flights. So there was a yearly allowance that I was allowed to use to book flights home. It was only for flights to your home country though. So it was a yearly allowance, but it meant every year my company paid for me to, if I wanted, fly back to the UK for a week and then go back to China. So you can get reimbursed for flights. It all will be in your contract. You'll have to look at your contract, but it's definitely a possibility. Like I said, I was reimbursed for my flights, and even when I got there, they gave me a interest-free loan. So they gave me, I think converted, it was around £1,000 as a loan that they then took £100 for the first 10 months of my working there with no interest, just to help me pay for my house, pay for the deposit for my house, and to get you up and running. So if you find a good company, they will help you a lot, and you're not alone to completely finance it yourself. A lot of them will help, and the flights, you can get reimbursed for flights.
Yeah, brilliant.
And check the contract, ask in the interview process as well. These are all questions that if you're looking at a job, and I would advise not just one interview, because if you interview for 4 different companies and you write down all of the perks that they're offering, you can then look back after you've interviewed before and say, well, these 3 give me this, but this one gives me all of that, and they'll reimburse my flights and give me a yearly allowance. So that would be my advice, but you can claim the cost of your flight with certain companies.
Great, that's good to hear. I think Tamara also asked about house hunting as well, and if the company helps you do that, and how do you get set up? But you've answered a bit of that, but
yeah, I'll just briefly. They do help. They give you estate agents. So my company gave me estate agents, said, Lisa, ones that we trust and that you can do. But normally, because you fly out, it's rare that you'll fly out with a company that you're the only teacher flying out at that time. They normally do it in batches. So every 2 weeks, they'll have 10 teachers, 15, 20 teachers that are flying out. So you'll meet people. You know, the first night I was there, I met one of the people at the airport while we were waiting for our lift to the hotel. And then that night I saw 6, 7 people filter in, and it was quite obvious that they were from the same company. So you just go over, say hi, you find people you like, and you say, look, we're all looking for a house. There's no one that's got a house already. So you've got 20 foreigners that have just arrived, and you build connections quickly. Everyone's a little bit nervous, so you find friends very quickly, and then you just view houses with them 2 or 3 people you want to live with. And then within 2 weeks, I was in a house. Within 2 weeks.
That's fast turnaround. Yeah, definitely.
It's a fast turnaround. And that was it. I mean, my house, it was great. It was a penthouse. It was really, really nice. We had 2 balconies, big rooms. So yeah, it's an easy process. If you're worried about house hunting, don't be. It's one part of it, and everyone gets a house very quickly.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm sure that would be helpful for Mara to know. Thanks, Mara. We've also got a question from Ash, who asks about non-native, being a non-native and finding a teaching position abroad. Did you have any non-native speakers? I think China might require you to be.
China, it was when I was there anyway, it was native was required, but there are more and more countries that are more accepting of non-native teachers. A lot of it, and it doesn't make sense, but people think native speakers are automatically going to be better teachers, which is not the case in any way, shape or form, but that is the way it's perceived. And we had certain parents, especially in China, that only wanted native teacher because they thought they were going to get a better experience. We had parents that asked for a meeting with us and said, you're a really good teacher, but my son still has a Chinese accent when he speaks English, but we want him to have an American accent. And we were like, but your son is Chinese. He's not going to immediately become an American because he's being taught by an American teacher. So sometimes it's more just what parents, for the wrong reasons, think is going to be better for their children. But we've seen in the past couple of years that non-native teachers are starting to get more opportunities, and there's certain countries that are absolutely fine with non-native teachers, as they should be, really, because it should be how good you are at teaching, and the native doesn't really have any relevance. But definitely look, I mean, there are companies out there, there are countries out there that are very they have lots of teaching positions for non-natives.
Yeah, I think there's quite a few in Asia as well. Places like London, Vietnam, I believe, except non-native speakers. And we actually have a guide to that subject, finding work as a non-native speaker, on our blog. So I don't know if one of my colleagues, Alan, if you can put a link to that maybe in the comments, that might be helpful. But so that's a great place to check out where you can work if you're a non-native speaker as well. Let's have a look at some more questions. Okay, I think we've some of those already. About content. So Claire asked, how does working online, how does on teaching work in terms of pay? Do you get paid into an English bank account or an account in China and then transfer to an English bank account?
Yeah, that's a great question. So because my contract was in China, and then when I flew back to England, I didn't have access to my Chinese account, and you can't easily send money. China's one of the only places that doesn't let foreigners transfer money from from their country to abroad. So I was very concerned because I was like, I'm working and I might not have access to any of my funds. I spoke to my company and they said, just give us your English account and we'll get it to you. And they got it to me. So I got paid into my English account. So I didn't have to do that. And I mean, this is obviously specific to China, but although you can't transfer your money out of China, a Chinese national can. So if you have a Chinese national co-worker that you trust, I had one that I trusted, I sent my money to them and then they sent it to me. So there's ways around anything, but normally if you get the job and you're teaching from England, they will pay you to an English account. If they don't say that or ask it in your interview, but they would, that you would get paid into your English account.
Yeah, brilliant. Good to know that you can still get paid.
Yeah, of course.
Laura again asked, when teaching online, are there busier and quieter times of the year? So does it follow kind of term times of the kind of school in person as well?
So with teaching online, it really depends on your schedule. So a lot of companies will let you pick your working hours. So they can be as busy or as quiet as you want. If you want for Christmas to reduce your schedule to only 2 hours a day, you can do that with certain companies. Certain companies, once you've got your schedule, you have to keep that schedule because one of the big things is the parents want a consistent online teacher. So they don't want a teacher for 2 weeks and then another teacher because they want their kid to have consistency. So really it's however you want to set up your initial schedule. So with mine, I knew that I wanted Saturdays off. So I didn't schedule anything on Saturdays ever. I just blanked out my Saturday schedule and I didn't because I wanted to have that day. But I did have Sunday afternoons because that was when I could do it. So a lot of it is very flexible. Now, face-to-face, there are busier and quieter times of the year. So we actually my company has a summer and winter period where you actually had to teach more classes because they ran extra classes. So it really does depend on who you're working for. I know that doesn't help too much, but normally it's very flexible. The teaching online, you make your own schedule most of the time. So if you want to be really busy, you can open up all your time slots and you can do 7, 8 lessons a day. I would not suggest that because you will burn out. It is harder than you think to stare at a screen for 8 hours and engage people virtually. Like even for an hour, it can be a little bit hard. So I would suggest if you are building your online schedule, have breaks in between. Do a lesson and have at least a half an hour break before you do your next one. Because the first couple of weeks, you might think, yeah, I could do this. But there'll be days where you're not up to it and you'll need them little periods. But most companies, when you sign up, they'll give you that advice as well. So yeah, that's all I've got there.
No, that's good. Yeah, definitely good not to burn out. Let's have a look at some other questions. So we've got one from Imani. What was the application process when you applied for your job in China? And what was the interview process like?
Yeah, we haven't really spoke about that. So
yeah.
So I applied with lots of companies. So I had interviews with, I think, 5 different companies, and all of them were just send my CV, send a picture and a bio, a short, 4-line paragraph of a little bit about you and why you want to teach abroad. And then you will have an interview with a recruiter who are really nice. They're really down to earth. It doesn't feel like a traditional interview. It will be quite relaxed. They'll mainly just ask about what your passions are, your stuff that isn't really fitting of a normal interview. Once you've got through that first round, you'll either have another interview or you'll be offered it after that. I applied for 5 different companies and I had the interviews over a week. I got offers from 5 companies.
Oh, wow.
And I had never taught before.
Yeah.
It's more about having a passion to actually want to do it and to be the right personality for the company. So I was lucky. I could pick whichever one I wanted. But the interview process is quite relaxed and it's more just a conversation than like, where do you want to be in 5 years' time? It's not that sort of interview. It's more relaxed and it's more just about getting to know you as a person. So yeah, I wouldn't be too worried about that. And like I said, the application, it was a CV, it was a picture, and it was a brief bio of why I wanted to teach and a little bit about, you know, hobbies and stuff. So nothing to be concerned about.
Oh, great. I'm sure people will find that very reassuring. Let's find some more questions. Thank you for that question. That was a really good one. Ariston has a question. Speaking of teaching English online or in China, have you ever had to teach English for specific purposes? I suppose things like exam preparation or business English or anything like that. And how did that go?
Yes, good question. Yeah, I have. We had one of the things in China, one of the big things is when I think they're ridiculously young, when they're 5 or 6 years old, in order to get into a bilingual school, they have to have an interview. So when they're 5 or 6 years old, they have to have an interview in Chinese and then an interview in English in order to get through to a bilingual school. It's brutal, the education system out there. So our company would have a VIP class that would have a one-on-one with a kid that was coming up to his interview for the bilingual school, and I would have to get him ready for that exam. It's easier than you think. If you know the specific purpose of what you're trying to teach them, you look at what they're going to have in the interview, and then you work at games that will be able to answer them questions when he gets it. That was one of the ones that was obviously very specific, and it was a completely different class to a normal class because it was primarily so that that kid passed that interview in order to get into that school. So I would concentrate on the things that I knew were going to be in the interview. So it's really just a case of looking at the content. So how I went about it was I looked at the content, I looked at the interview, and I looked at what the kid that I'm teaching needs to be able to do. So my first lesson, I would go through all of the content and have a tick box of what he knows and what he doesn't know. So the stuff he already knows, don't even need to teach him it. Throw that bit away of my lesson plan. The stuff that he doesn't know, I would then create a lesson plan for the stuff he doesn't know. Because there's no point teaching any level if they already know it. You're just rehashing content. They're going to get bored and they're not going to find it interesting. So just look at what they know already, look at what they need to know, and then concentrate on the things they don't know.
That's great advice. Yeah. Thanks, Ariston. That's a really good question. We also have a question from Rachel who wants to know what the average age of the other teachers were.
So when I flew out, I was 25, 26, 25. I would say the average age was about 22 to 28. It really is a broad range. There were some people there that were 40, 45, 50. There were some people there that were 21, fresh out of university. Because China had, you have to have a degree to teach in China. The youngest was 21, and that's purely because in order to have done uni, unless you're very smart, 21's the age. So yeah, most people were mid-20s. I would say if I had to give an age range, it would be 22 to 28 was the average. But all walks of life and all ages. Some of the more experienced teachers, because they'd been there 5 years, were 31, 32. So it is a range, and no one, I mean, quite a lot of people think, oh, I have to be young to go and teach a foreign language, but not at all. There was some really good teachers that loved their jobs that got into it when they were a lot older. And it really depends on what you're looking for. But yeah, the average age was still 22 to 28.
Yeah. Those kind of people who are looking for like travel and new experiences.
Yeah.
And yeah. So that's good to know that you've got other people in the same boat as you. Definitely. So Maria has a question. She says, it seems like teaching is really your dream job. What's your secret to being creative all the time in your lessons?
So there was a lot of things that I liked about teaching, but for me, it wasn't a long-term thing. So it might have been my dream job while I was doing it, but for me, there wasn't long-term sort of, but that's me personally. I met plenty of people that had been doing it for 5-10 years and loved it. So it really is just, as long as you've got some passion. Even though it's not my dream job, I enjoyed doing it while I was doing it. There wasn't a day I hated going to work, because it was almost like you could create your lesson to how you wanted it to be, as long as you were hitting the targets of the lesson and the target language and all other, you could make it how you wanted. So there's no real
make
secret.
It fun for yourself. Yeah. As well as
there's no secret. It's more just doing what works for you. If you really enjoy art and painting, then make a part of your lesson, not the whole lesson, because then they're not going to learn what they need to learn, but have a 5-10 minute segment that's a painting section where if they get all their work done and you like painting as well, you set them a challenge, beat teacher's drawing, and you make a drawing and they've got to make a better one. So really find what works for you and then run with it.
It's good that you can make it that creative. You can just make it, engaging for yourself as well as the students. Definitely. We have a question. We're getting to the end now. I think we'll probably have just a few minutes left of the webinar. But Brian has asked, what's the going hourly rate for a new online teacher now? I'm sure it depends company to company, but do you have an idea?
Yeah, so it does depend company to company. It can range drastically. Some of the classes aren't a full hour, so you'll get paid 6-7 English pounds a lesson, but the lesson's only half an hour, or it might be a set rate. It really does depend. We do have on our website, we have a list of online companies, and in that web page, it actually breaks down the pay rate, and it does change depending on experience, on demand as well, how many hours you work. So there's no short answer to that, but it's a range that's between sort of £8-9 an hour to, there are some that you can get if you have some experience, and a lot will say start at this, but after 6 months it will go to this, and then it will go to this. You get rewarded for staying at companies, but it can go up to sort of $15-20. I know if you specialize as well, if you specialize in teaching business online, or if you specialize in a certain thing, the pay is a lot more. And there's also places that are sort of, you create your profile and you can choose your own rate. So you can say, look, I want to teach business online. Here is my credentials. Here's my profile, but I'm charging $25 an hour. And it might take a while to get anyone interested, and you might have to look at the competition on the site. So look at what everyone else is charging and try and charge sort of the medium price of that, so you can get students, and then you can increase it. So there's a variety of options, and it depends on a variety of factors.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of difference there. We also, my colleague Alan, he's just put a guide to how much you can earn online as well in the comments there. So if you're interested in a bit more information about that, you can click there. I think we've just got one more question now from Claire Goodwin again. Thanks, Claire. Have you maintained contact with other teachers that you taught with in China?
So I still talk to lots of teachers from face to face. Teach online, I didn't meet any other teachers because I'm teaching online. So that's one of the benefits, and there were lots of benefits to both parts of it, but the social aspect of actually physically going abroad and teaching for me outweighed the online. That's one of the reasons I stopped the online, was because it was great, it was flexible, I could do it wherever I wanted, I could make my own schedule, but there was no social aspect, and I'm a social person, and that's why teaching abroad was better for me. But everyone's different. So, and I still have contact with teachers that I met 3 years ago, and I see them quite regularly because some of them are back in the UK, but I also have teachers that stayed in China and I still talk to, and you meet people that they're not just see you for 3 months and then never speak to you again. You'll make lasting connections with people.
Yeah, definitely make connections for life, especially as you're working and traveling, about a unique experience. Definitely. Brilliant. Thank you. I think that's all the questions that we had. Cool. Thank you, everyone, for those questions. They were really good. Thank you, Luke,
That's okay.
for all of your answers. I think that was really helpful. Brilliant.
Yeah, I hope people at least got something out of it. And, even from and no one's going to have the same experiences, but that's my honest opinion to it. And it was a great experience, both teaching abroad and teaching online. I don't regret doing it at all.
Brilliant. That's a good summary for sure. Okay, perfect. Well, if you've got any more questions, you can pop them in the comments and we'll try and get to them later on as well. But apart from that, everyone have a wonderful weekend. Happy Friday. And yeah, we'll see you next week.